It began without warning, the kind of moment no one reports until it is already too late to ignore. On an otherwise ordinary morning, two names appeared in a local human interest brief, barely noticed among politics, markets, and weather alerts. There was nothing dramatic in the wording at first, just a short update about a delayed train, a missed appointment, and two strangers who happened to be standing under the same leaking roof when the rain refused to stop. Yet this small, almost forgettable incident would soon grow into a story that readers and viewers would follow with unexpected intensity. According to early accounts, neither of them was looking for love. One was known for a quiet, disciplined life shaped by responsibility and routine, the other for emotional distance built after years of disappointment. Witnesses later described their first exchange as polite, brief, and practical, the kind of conversation that usually ends as soon as the problem is solved. But something unusual lingered, a pause that lasted a second too long, a look that suggested recognition without explanation. It was the kind of detail reporters often overlook, yet it became the foundation of everything that followed. As days passed, updates began to surface in subtle ways. Friends noticed changes, colleagues mentioned distracted behavior, small decisions started to carry unusual weight. What initially appeared to be coincidence slowly revealed a pattern, and that pattern caught public attention. Social media discussions framed it as a modern love story unfolding in real time, while others dismissed it as overanalysis of ordinary events. Still, interest grew, fueled by the realism of it all. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, only two people navigating emotions they had carefully avoided for years. What made the situation compelling, observers noted, was the sense of restraint. Instead of rushing forward, both individuals seemed to step back, as if aware that real love rarely announces itself clearly. Each interaction was cautious, measured, and layered with unsaid thoughts. News-style commentary focused on the tension between desire and fear, highlighting how personal history can quietly influence present choices. The story resonated because it felt familiar, almost uncomfortably so. By the end of this early phase, one thing was clear: this was not being shaped into a fantasy. It was unfolding like life itself, slow, uncertain, and emotionally complex. Analysts covering cultural trends began to describe it as a reminder that love does not always arrive with certainty, but often with questions. And as more people started following these developments, anticipation grew. Not for a dramatic twist, but for understanding what would happen when two guarded hearts were finally forced to confront the truth they had been carefully avoiding. As time moved forward, the situation shifted from quiet curiosity to what observers began calling a developing emotional narrative. What initially appeared calm and controlled started to show signs of strain, not through dramatic events, but through subtle changes in behavior and tone. Communication between the two remained present, yet noticeably cautious. Messages were carefully worded, meetings shorter than expected, and silences longer than before. Analysts following the story noted that this phase often determines whether a connection deepens or slowly dissolves. Sources close to the individuals reported that misunderstandings began to surface, not from conflict, but from hesitation. Important thoughts were left unsaid, and assumptions quietly replaced clarity. Daily responsibilities, professional pressure, and social expectations gradually interfered, turning simple moments into complicated decisions. Each choice carried emotional weight, and even small actions were interpreted as signals of intent or withdrawal. Coverage during this period focused heavily on emotional restraint, highlighting how fear can quietly compete with affection. Public reaction grew increasingly divided. Some viewers and readers believed the relationship was losing momentum, interpreting the distance as a warning sign. Others argued that this careful pacing reflected emotional maturity rather than avoidance. Online discussions framed the situation as a realistic portrayal of modern love, where individuals are often torn between emotional risk and self-protection. Despite growing attention, both individuals avoided public confirmation or denial, allowing speculation to fill the gaps. What stood out most during this phase was the tension between closeness and retreat. Moments of genuine connection were followed by periods of emotional withdrawal, creating an unstable rhythm that kept audiences engaged. Cultural commentators pointed out that this push and pull dynamic is common when past experiences shape present behavior. The story was no longer about coincidence, but about choice, whether to confront vulnerability or remain guarded. As developments continued, it became evident that this connection had crossed a threshold. It was no longer accidental or casual. It demanded resolution. Either both would move forward despite uncertainty, or silence would become the final outcome. Reports described this stage as the emotional turning point, where hesitation itself becomes a decision. By the end of this phase, one question dominated public attention. Would fear dictate the ending, or would honesty finally take its place? As the story reached its final stage, attention shifted from speculation to consequence. What had long remained unspoken could no longer be avoided. Observers noted a clear change in tone, as hesitation gave way to clarity, not through dramatic announcements, but through decisive action. The emotional distance that once defined the connection began to close, forcing both individuals to confront the reality they had postponed. Reports described this phase as the moment when uncertainty either transforms into commitment or collapses under its own weight. Sources indicated that a private conversation marked the turning point. There were no witnesses, no leaked messages, only the aftermath. Shortly after, those close to the situation noticed a shift, less avoidance, more intention. Decisions that had once been delayed were now addressed directly. This was not a sudden emotional breakthrough, but a steady acceptance of risk. Analysts covering the development emphasized that real love stories rarely resolve with spectacle. Instead, they conclude with honesty. Public response intensified as subtle confirmations began to appear. A shared appearance, a changed routine, and the quiet acknowledgement of something no longer hidden. For many following the story, this was the confirmation they had waited for. The narrative had resisted fantasy from the beginning, and its conclusion followed the same path. There were no perfect endings promised, only mutual understanding. Commentators described it as a mature resolution, reflecting how modern relationships often succeed not through passion alone, but through emotional accountability. Still, not everyone viewed the outcome as ideal. Some critics argued that the ending lacked dramatic payoff, while others praised it for precisely that reason. The absence of exaggerated romance reinforced the story's central message: love does not always arrive with certainty or guarantees. Sometimes it arrives with choice, made despite fear. Cultural analysts highlighted this ending as a reflection of contemporary emotional realities, where vulnerability is the true climax. By the final reports, it became evident that the story's impact extended beyond the individuals involved. Audiences connected with the realism, recognizing pieces of their own experiences within the narrative. The slow pacing, the restraint, and the eventual resolution all contributed to its lasting impression. It was not the kind of love story that fades after the credits roll, but one that lingers, inviting reflection. As coverage concluded, one final observation dominated discussion. This was not a story about finding love effortlessly, but about choosing it deliberately. In an era filled with instant connections and quick endings, this narrative stood apart by showing that sometimes the most powerful endings are quiet ones. And that, according to viewers and critics alike, is why this love story continues to resonate long after it ends.